So, good evening, and the news today doesn't seem to be very promising, with Trump and Netanyahu releasing what is supposedly the deal of the century, but accurately it should be called the theft of the century. An indicted prime minister of Israel who doesn't keep his hands away from all the things in Israel, so even his own police and his own authority have indicted him for corruption. And then we have our own president who is facing impeachment. They feel that the time for them to possibly celebrate or clean their record on the back of the Palestinians again. So just let me give a few minutes on the theft of the century, because it's been the 20th century and we're going into the 21st century of this colonial legacy and the continued colonization, building of settlements, and now making them legal, that has been unfolding under this plan of Zionism, and it's embraced by Great Britain and now the United States. So let's be very clear. There is not going to be a Palestinian state being born out of this plan. What we will be getting is, if anyone have managed to read the 50,000 words that said nothing, because it said nothing about the Palestinian rights, it said nothing about justice, it said nothing about actually Palestinian sovereignty. It is 50,000 of nothingness written by both Zionists from here in the United States and the Zionists and the Israeli right wing, and this is even giving credit to call them as such, wanting to basically arrive at cementing and having Israel total control of historical Palestine. So what we arrive at is an apartheid, where Palestinians will be living in Bantustan, in disconnected cantons that are controlled, totally controlled by Israeli security. Palestinians will not have any sovereignty over land, have no control over their airspace, have no control of aquifers, and this notion of having a Palestinian capital, and don't laugh, I know it's a little bit funny, a capital in Jerusalem, but not in Jerusalem itself, but the so-called expanded Jerusalem, because Jerusalem itself, as the historical city, all what we see in this so expanded Jerusalem, all these are territories and properties, villages that have been confiscated by Israel to create what is greater Jerusalem. So long and behold, Mr. Trump, who can't even pronounce Al-Aqsa, he called it Aqwa, which is possibly water. So all of a sudden we're going to have the Palestinians having the right to visit the Aqwa, which is a water basin, rather than Al-Aqsa Mosque or Jerusalem. And only if we come peacefully, as if Muslims or Palestinians are anything but peaceful, have been completely subject to one of the most violent colonial projects that had lasted 70 plus years, and adding insult to injury, not only that ethnically cleansing the Palestinians, taking their land, building settlements, tormenting them daily on checkpoints and borders, even robbing and taking trees, uprooting trees and then selling it across the border. All of this is not enough, but we actually get the insult to say that you will be allowed to visit our own city, Jerusalem, and Al-Aqsa Mosque. So that's essentially we arrived at a Bantustan, an apartheid system similar to South Africa. So anyone that has any notion, any delusion that this will actually arrive at a two-state solution, I think you need to go and possibly have an exam with a mental therapist on this case, because this will not produce anything other than an apartheid system that is in there. And the notion of two-state solution is dead. It's been dead for quite some time by the expression of many Israeli political leaders, including Netanyahu, who also happen to often peddling in racism at any time that he is able to do so. So the two-state solution is gone, and what we have is one state. And to be clear, it's one state that we have. It's an apartheid state where Israel has two sets of laws. one that applies to the Jewish Zionist population that lives in historical Palestine, and one set of laws or military rules for those under occupation that applies to the Palestinians. Historical Palestine now have equal population of Jewish population and Palestinian, Christian, Muslims, and Jewish, Arab Palestinians who live there. And what you have is a democracy for the Jewish Zionist population, including the Arabs in 1948 who have Arab Palestinians in 48 who have some level of democratic participation, but don't let that fools you, because they're still subject to almost 70 discriminatory laws in 1948. And then you have an apartheid system and a military system that is applied to the Palestinians. So we have an apartheid system that is unfolding in front of our eyes and has been the case so on. Now, the other part of this plan is a whole package of economic incentives. And I described this time and time again. This is what the Israelis are offering the Palestinians, including with their U.S. partner. They're offering a golden cage for the Palestinians. And I know that some Palestinians who are part of the financial economic elite will jump at the opportunities to partner with Israel, and some also in the Arab world, unfortunately, have been engaged in opening relations and having economic relations with Israel, whether in the immediate surroundings of Israel. And for those who have been monitoring the Jordanian-Israeli gas deal, they understand that there are some who are ready to basically sell their own dignity and sell their own economy to the benefit possibly of crumbs that are offered to them. And I think some Palestinians will do so, but that again will not change or alter the fundamental pillar that the Palestinians still insist on their rights of return. This is the right of their refugees to return to their homelands. They still insist on actually having their properties and rights respected. They still insist on making sure that they have the rights of movement to, both in historical Palestine as well as wherever they choose. And this plan that is dead on arrival will not guarantee or provide the Palestinians of any of these elements, and the economic incentives are only made to try to bring some of the Palestinian elites in order for them to accept the unacceptable to the Palestinians. So this is again what we have in front of us. So what we immediately need, again, as both Palestinians and those who are advocates and supporters of Palestinians, including, I would say, some of our major segment of our Jewish brothers and sisters here in the United States and other parts, that we need to actually say that there has to be some changes taking place. One, we call on the Palestinian body politic and all the Palestinians, organizations, groups to close rank and come up with a very clear statement on what are the Palestinians' national project, what are the Palestinian fundamental calls and claims to be put forth, and enough of being in essence, a guardian or actually a paid guards, private security service for the Israeli settlements and settlers. The Palestinian Authority is an authority but does not represent the Palestinians in terms of its rights and responsibility. Has been set up to protect the settlements, to protect settlers, to protect Israel's interest at the expense of the Palestinians. So we need a very clear statement by the Palestinian Authority to completely bring to an end the charade that is called the Oslo Agreement, whatever calamity, that compounded calamity that has brought to the Palestinians. So that's a fundamental step that needs to be taken. Second, I think the Palestinians, both inside Palestine and those in the diaspora, we need to call for a government in exile. It is incomprehensible for us to have a Palestinian Authority that is supposedly to try to represent the Palestinians, that is living and functioning underneath the Israeli security apparatus, underneath the Israeli security infrastructure occupation, which often is actually being meddled with and cooperated and managed by the United States and surrounding Arab countries. So the time is right now for us to actually have a government in exile that begins to represent the rights of the Palestinians under occupation as well as those that are living in the diaspora. Anything other than that, I would say, will be criminal at this point for us to move into that step, to be very clear on what is taking place. Third, I think for Palestinians as well as their allies, we need to take Israeli political leadership to task. And I think we have to continue to explore the International Criminal Court for bringing charges on the Israeli war crimes that continues to be committed. And also, I would say, for us to advocate the mobilization of the Convention on Genocide, because what the Palestinians have been experiencing since 1948, if not before, are systematic acts of genocide of the Palestinians that fits the definition of the Convention of Genocide. And I think the Palestinian leadership, both internally as well as externally, with allies from various governments and institutions that are allied with the Palestinians, need to bring this forth and to actually activate and bring into force the regime of international law. Fourth, I think what we need is to increase and intensify our work on BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanction. Israel is no longer interested in listening to other than itself. It has a White House that dances to its tunes, and this White House is also in alliance or in constant reflection of the Christian coalition and their millenarian end of time scenarios. So there is no way for the political leadership, whether it's here domestically in the United States or in Israel, to listen to anything other than the continued mobilization for the PDS. And I think in here there is no excuse for anyone at this point to lecture the Palestinians or lecture the Palestinian activists or anything on the need for adoption and mobilization of the PDS movement. At a time where Israel has already annexed the Golan Heights, already have annexed the West Bank, already has swallowed Jerusalem, already drinks the water from the aquifers and above the aquifers, continuously on a daily basis choose the Palestinians, it daily humiliates the Palestinians in checkpoints, and then we have some smart aleck in, whether it's in Muslim spaces or Arab spaces or liberal spaces, that tell the Palestinians that the PDS is some form of anti-Semitism. If there is any racism that is there, it is not actually adhering and respecting the non-violent movement of the Palestinians that is demanding basic rights. Rights of dignity, rights to freedom, right of fairness, right for democratic rights and participation, rights for their lands, right of movements at a fundamental basis. So in here, again, the PDS movement is a movement that was called on by the Palestinian civil society, and it's time for anyone that has any ounce of integrity and principle to adopt the PDS movement. So we want to see institutions, Muslim institutions, Arab institutions, institutions that are from our allies to actually adhere and bring the full force of the PDS movement. More so also in the Arab world, and I know some of in the Arab world and Muslim world have had open both economic relations and also some have diplomatic relations. There is no excuse for not actually mobilizing and making sure that your pocketbook can speak for your political principles and alliance with the Palestinians. And therefore, this is something that we have to commit ourselves in the days and weeks ahead in order to counter this theft of the century that has been ongoing, and this recent, I don't want to call it plan, because to say that it's a plan will be an insult. It's not a peace process. To call it a peace process is also an insult. It's not a peace process. It is basically a third tier or fourth tier intellect sitting together and cooking 50,000 words of nothingness for the Palestinians will not bring any end to the Palestinians, not bring an end to the occupation, and if anything cements and rewards Israel for its intransigence. Now I know in some corners among the Zionist movement there is celebration take place, but don't hold your breath. Your problem is still there. There are 6 million Palestinians that are not going anywhere, and there are 6 million Palestinians that are demanding your rights. If you're going to celebrate, basically I would say take your time, don't breathe easy at this point. There is still, the demands are the same. We still have a demands for our rights. We still have a demands for sovereignty. We still have demands for the right of return. We still have a demand for our rights to be protected. And everyone that have committed a crime against the Palestinians, sooner or later, will have to answer for it. Will have to actually face the various institutions, international institutions, as well as Palestinian institutions. The only thing that is constant in the world is change. So the fact that you have celebrated whatever power momentarily you have, and you think that you could bring that power politically and otherwise to array it against the Palestinians, it does not bring an end or conclude this episode relative to the Palestinians and the contestation that is taken to in the history of Palestine. The last thing I would say that I was very taken back by the tweets that came out from the Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs, were basically nodding an acceptance of the Trump's peace process or peace plan, and then simultaneously speaking from the other side of the mouth, saying that the Palestinians and the Israelis should engage in negotiation. And this is basically what you call obfuscation statements, where the Saudi Arabia's government is very clear in nodding and basically subtext of accepting this plan because the understanding that their relationship with Israel has been warming up with a possibility of a future confrontation or regional confrontation with Iran, which is a much bigger priority for them rather than to stand on principle against settler colonialism that has been unfolding in Palestine. So again, we want to insist, we want to have a clarity of statements that comes out, not a double speak. This is not the time for double speak or triple speak. We're not in the period where we actually can have individuals that attempts to essentially use a language where on the one hand they are continued to expand their relationship and both openly and within private quarters with Israel under the premise that Iran is the major threat to the Gulf, which is not the case, but that's aside different discussions altogether. So we want the clarity from Saudi Arabia, considering that they have been warming up to some of the major figures of the Zionist movement in the United States, as well as some relations with Israelis on the principle or on the discussions of the region. So this is the time where we need to take both our friends and our allies, as well as Arab and Muslim countries, to task at this particular time, because this is not the time of confusion, this is the time of clarity, and it's very clear that Israel wants to bring a final status to its benefit, knowing the disarray and the fragmentation of the Arab world, and also the weakness and the fragmentation in other parts of the United States and Europe. So in essence in here that the Israeli American relations is trying to force a deal that is unacceptable to the Palestinians, that annex territories that are illegal, that under Resolution 181 of the United Nations, it's illegal for Israel to annex the Jordan Valley. It's illegal for Israel to annex the Golan Heights. It's illegal for Israel to annex Jerusalem, both Eastern and Western Jerusalem and the expanded Jerusalem. It's illegal for Israel to continue to steal the water from the Palestinian aquifers. It's illegal for Israel to continue to keep the refugees away per Resolution 192. And I know I'm repeating all these that are pillars of international law, and knowing that both the United States and many other countries have violated international law, but nevertheless, the case is very clear in relations to the Palestinians. So I wanted to share my reflection and my reading of this plan, and I'm sorry for calling it a plan. It's not really a plan other than 50 words of Zionist language of cementing Herzl ideas and bringing Herzl ideas into revisionist Zionism of Jabotinsky and Likud, and now Netanyahu is trying to create the greater Israel. So my final word is that we have two possibilities. Either it's a one state based on democratic principle of equality of all, justice and fairness, and the right of return to Palestinians, or we're staring at an apartheid state. So next time an Israeli spokesperson come, let them make the choice on whether they want an apartheid state, which they have right now, or they want to join the democratic world and the world that actually believes in equality, believes in fairness, believes in justice, and want that to be reflected in their values and their attitude. So hopefully that will raise these issues also as we come into this coming election cycle. Make sure that when you go and attend any of these political gatherings, congressmen, senators, or the presidential candidate, ask them for clarity on their stand on Palestine. No wishy-washy, no AIPAC speak, please. We want for you to actually be very clear, especially at this particular time. If you want to be different than Trump, then you have to be different in words and deeds and not use AIPAC speak as a way for you to relate to the broader American society. So I look forward to seeing many of you in the days and weeks ahead, and let's mobilize politically at this particular time and make sure silence is not gonna resolve. Make sure that your voice is heard respectfully, but make your voice heard and engage in the political process. Change is not possible without people continue to advocate for the cause, and Palestine is a solid cause and a just cause for us to continue to advocate. South Africa became free after a long period of time, and I do believe that Palestine will be free. It's only a matter of time. It's not a promise. It's a matter. It just takes many of us and all of us together to bring this about, and I look forward to working with you all to make it or to actualize it. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for listening, and look forward to seeing you in the days and months ahead.